There is a different kind of fame, one that doesn't shout, but evaporates into the rain mist of the English countryside. Somerset, England. A land of green hills, forgotten churches, weathered stone walls, and skies that never fully decide what mood they want. Here the rain is not violent, it whispers. It taps lightly against the windows of a 19th century estate, its rhythm steady, like a heartbeat returning to peace after years of cinematic chaos. Inside, the man the world spent 4 decades staring at is nobody at all. There is no entourage, no agents, no flashing bulbs, just the creak of old wood floors, the smell of linseed oil, and a kettle sighing toward a boil. This is Johnny Depp's exile, except it is not punishment. It is oxygen. The mansion looks like it walked straight out of Downton Abbey. Velvet curtains, portraits of strangers long dead, fireplaces that breathe warmth into stone. But there is paint where most aristocratic estates would hide antiques. Canvases leaning against carved door frames, tubes of color spilling like torn veins of cobalt, crimson, and cadmium. A man sits alone, hair pinned back, cigarette burning slow between fingers stained with yellow paint. He watches raindrops bead their way down glass, the gardens beyond blurred and dreamlike. He once lived under a sun that burned. Now he prefers clouds. He walks Somerset's narrow village streets the way a boy sneaks out past midnight. Head down, unassuming, in oversized coats and scarves large enough to erase identity. He shops at the local supermarket. The cashier, a teenager, once asked him if anyone ever told him he looked like Johnny Depp. He nodded politely, smiled, and paid for his groceries. There are stories of him visiting antique shops, slipping into bookstores, sitting quietly in a pub corner. Not the star. Just a man who appreciates history, craftsmanship, the patina of objects touched by time. Here he is Johnny, not the myth, not the pirate, not the courtroom meme, not the Hollywood currency, just a shy man who paints. He once confessed softly, "In truth, I'm quite a shy person." And there lies the paradox. The man whose face launched global franchises and tabloid wars never actually wanted to be seen. He wanted to disappear into roles, to transform so completely that he could hide in them. The world pushed him onto a pedestal. He wanted a studio, brushes, guitars, quiet. Somerset indulges him. The rain blurs him. The villagers accept him. A legend retreats, not bitterly, but like a man reclaiming the parts of his soul that fame demanded as tribute. He paints, methodically, obsessively, not the slick celebrity style. His canvases are rough, layered, emotional. The texture is thick, almost sculpted. He paints faces, friends, heroes, wounded souls. He paints the way people bleed in strokes. Some canvases glow warm, others are war zones of color. But each one feels like someone speaking through him. He said he was a musician before an actor, but truthfully, he has always been an artist. Hollywood was just the longest detour. Here in Somerset's drizzle, he returns home. Not geographically, but spiritually. There are no paparazzi waiting at the gate. No studio executives leaning on his pocket like a crutch. The silence is shocking and healing. He cooks. He plays guitar at odd hours. He wanders the estate like a ghost of his own past life. The walls do not demand performance, only presence. For the first time in decades, life is unscored. No soundtrack, no dialogue, no audience. Just breath. Perhaps the ultimate irony is that the man who became one of Hollywood's most visible faces spent his entire life trying to disappear. And here, in the rain-washed countryside, He finally succeeds. But exile never lasts. Peace is never permanent. Somewhere far away on the Riviera, lights are warming, flashbulbs are charging, a festival is preparing for its spectacle. And fate, that old playful fox, knocks gently on his studio door. There are moments when the world calls you back, not to reclaim a throne, but to discover whether your shadow has finally outrun the storm. The south of France glitters differently than Somerset. The rain is replaced by heat, salt air, perfume, champagne, flashes. The Cannes Film Festival is not subtle. It doesn't whisper, it announces. It is the cathedral of cinema, the red carpet laid out like an altar, the cameras hungry as wolves. In 2023, the festival prepared for one of its most controversial premieres, Jean Depp, a period film and Johnny Depp's first major screen reappearance since the trial. Some called it a comeback. Others called it audacity. He did not call it anything. He simply arrived. The car door opened, and the Riviera light struck him. Dark glasses, hair pulled back. A small smile, not the pirate grin of Jack Sparrow, not the swaggering Hollywood persona, but the private smile of a man watching the world from behind glass. There were whispers before the film even rolled. Articles wrote that he shouldn't be there. Commentators frothed, craving scandal more than cinema. Cannes, ironically, is a place that pretends to worship film, but secretly worships narrative. Who rises, who falls, who has permission to walk the steps. Johnny walked them anyway. Inside the Palais, the audience waited. The screen flickered to life. The film played. But the real drama was not on screen. It was in the room. Critics who had written him off now watched him with an uneasy awareness. This is not a ghost. This is a survivor. When the credits faded, there was a stillness, that dangerous pause when judgment gathers itself. Then someone stood, then another, and another. Applause began like rain, small drops, uncertain. Then it grew. It thundered. It roared. A 7-minute standing ovation. 7 minutes is not clapping. It is absolution. He stood there, a little startled, eyes wet, or perhaps reflecting the lights. He lifted a hand, not triumphantly, but gratefully, almost shyly, like a man overwhelmed by a kindness he thought he had lost. He stepped out onto the balcony. The Riviera wind lifted strands of hair, and for a moment he looked like a man meeting himself again. People say the ovation was for the film. Maybe, but those who watched could see the truth. It was the industry whispering, "Welcome back." The next day, the press conference, that ceremonial interrogation of cinema. Reporters poised their pens, ready for the headline they craved. Johnny leaned into the microphone and said softly, "I don't need Hollywood anymore." The room froze. Some interpreted it as arrogance, but arrogance rarely speaks quietly. This was something else. It was liberation. He had learned something Somerset had already been teaching him, that the machine feeds on fear. Only when you stop needing it does it stop owning you. For decades, he had believed he needed Hollywood. Now he understood. Hollywood needs stories. Hollywood needs myths. Hollywood needs symbols. Johnny Depp was all three. He was the rebel heart of 90s counterculture, the rock star actor, the man studios built billion-dollar franchises around, and then tried to erase when it became inconvenient. But myths don't vanish because institutions wish them away. Cannes revealed the truth. The audience chose him long before the industry did. Hollywood no longer held jurisdiction over his existence. He had lived through exile. He had walked through fire. And he had returned, not to rebuild a career, but to reclaim identity. The applause at Cannes was not about vindication, it was about recognition. The world saw the man, not the caricature scripted by tabloids. After Cannes, something subtle changed. He no longer chased the spotlight. The spotlight followed. Film festivals extended invitations. Fashion houses leaned in. Fans who had been silent out of fear stood tall again. But the man in the Somerset rain was unchanged. He went back home. He painted. He fed the dogs. He visited antique shops. Cannes was not a coronation. It was a punctuation mark. A reminder that legends are not erased by rumor. They are tested by it. Johnny's return was not loud, not desperate, not triumphant in the Hollywood sense. It was something far rarer. Quiet endurance rewarded. When he said, "I don't need Hollywood," he did not slam a door. He simply acknowledged he had already walked through another one. The industry, hearing it, realized something painfully true. He had always been the free one. They had just mistaken his generosity for dependence. As Somerset rain began to fall again, Johnny returned to his studio. Cannes was behind him. The brush was in his hand. And in that stillness, he lived proof of a lesson most stars never learn. The ultimate comeback is not applause. It is peace. There is a kind of victory so silent that most people don't recognize it. A verdict made headlines. A settlement became debate. The trial became spectacle. But Johnny Depp, the man who endured ridicule, laughter, accusation, and exile, never celebrated. He didn't tour television studios. He didn't weaponize interviews. He didn't turn bitterness into branded content. He did something shockingly rare in the age of vengeance. He withdrew. He disappeared. Not to gloat, but to breathe. That silence said more than any victory speech ever could. He understood something many never learn. A fight may bring justice, but it never brings peace. Peace must be chosen. He once echoed an old proverb. Resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. And there is no wisdom more earned than the kind you bleed for. Johnny chose to put down the cup. After the trial, there were no fireworks. There was paint. There was music. There was Somerset rain. His closest friends and colleagues noticed the shift. Johnny was not trying to win. He was trying to heal. In interviews after the whirlwind, journalists wanted drama. They wanted spite. They wanted headlines. He gave them something else: deflection, laughter, philosophy. He never mocked Amber Heard. He never campaigned for her ruin. He never went on a victory lap. Because the truth was simple. He didn't need her downfall to feel restored. The world had already decided. The applause at Cannes had already spoken. So Johnny chose something harder: forgiveness through indifference. Not forgetfulness, not reconciliation, but that quiet acceptance that life is too short to remain chained to someone else's chaos. He moved on, and that was his loudest statement. Then came something no one predicted: a return to the director's chair. It had been 25 years since he directed a film. His last one, The Brave, was misunderstood, dismissed by critics, lost beneath Hollywood's expectations. But now, he chose to direct again, not because he needed studios, but because he needed expression. The film was called Modi, a portrait of Italian artist Amedeo Modigliani, a man tortured by brilliance, a soul who drank life faster than it could heal him, a figure ridiculed, dismissed, only to be exalted long after death. Johnny once read Modigliani's letters and saw himself between the lines. Artists recognize each other across centuries. He understood the loneliness, the exile, the desperation to create not for praise, but for necessity. Directing Modi was not career strategy, it was spiritual kinship. And then, something ironic happened. Hollywood had rejected him, critics had mocked him, corporate machinery had distanced itself. Yet the luxury world, the world that hides behind perfume and silk but secretly worships authenticity, never left. Dior. The house that had made him the face of Sauvage stood by him through the storm. While studios paused contracts, Dior renewed. While advertisers recoiled, Dior doubled down. After his trial, they gave him what became a record-shattering $20 million renewal, the largest male fragrance contract in history. Not because perfume sells rebellion, but because loyalty sells everything. Dior was not investing in a scandal. It was honoring a truth. Johnny Depp had retained what Hollywood forgot, human resonance. People didn't believe his fame. They believed his vulnerability, his weathered voice, his restless painter's hands, his wounded eyes. They were not manufactured. They were lived. And brands, more than studios, understand that authenticity cannot be mass-produced. But there is another quiet victory that speaks even louder. In Somerset, he continued to paint. He sold pieces privately, not as celebrity paraphernalia, but as canvases worth standing beside. He was no longer merely an actor who paints. He was regarded increasingly as an artist who happens to act. This is the evolution fame rarely allows. When the noise finally died, the real person emerged. He built a life not around cameras, but around creation. Music, art, film, silence. He poured his battles into pigments, his losses into brush strokes, his grief into melody. Somerset was no longer exile, it was monastery. And the wisdom forged in the fire was simple, but profound. Winning in court is nothing if you don't win yourself back. Johnny did. Not through revenge, not through spectacle, but through art. That is why his return does not resemble a comeback. It resembles rebirth. Some characters belong to studios, some belong to writers, some belong to audiences. But every now and then, a character belongs to the actor who breathed it alive. For Johnny Depp, that character was a pirate, a drunk, stumbling, reckless philosopher named Jack Sparrow. On paper, Sparrow was comic relief, a side eccentric, a cartoon. But Johnny saw something else. He saw the fool as truth-teller, the outcast as prophet, the rebel as the only honest voice in a world of uniformed hypocrisy. So he played Jack as an anarchic rock star poet, part Keith Richards, part silent clown, part wounded child. Disney executives panicked. Is he drunk? Is this satire? Will children understand him? Children didn't understand him. They recognized him. Because Jack Sparrow wasn't a pirate. He was freedom. Freedom from rules. Freedom from reputation. Freedom from expectation. Freedom to fail loudly and rise laughing. Johnny once explained, almost quietly, that he never saw Sparrow as comic, but tragic. A man whose bravado masked loneliness. Perhaps that was why he fit it so well. In museums centuries from now, if historians chart iconic cinematic archetypes, Jack Sparrow will stand beside Chaplin's Little Tramp and Heath Ledger's Joker. A figure too alive to be fiction. People forget. Jack Sparrow was nearly cut from the first film. Executives tried rewriting him. They asked Johnny to tone it down. He refused. He fought for Sparrow not because it was a career move, but because it was a form of self-expression. Jack was the avatar for every part of Johnny's life Hollywood never understood. The misunderstood fool. The joker who hides scars beneath laughter. The man drifting between worlds, never fully accepted but always unforgettable. That is why children gravitate to Sparrow at Disneyland, why adults still quote him, why cosplayers keep resurrecting him. Because Jack Sparrow was never a performance. He was a confession. And so, as the world watched Johnny burn, many asked, will he ever play Jack again? Studios hesitated. Executives cowered. Public relations strategists advised silence. But the public never let Jack die. People painted murals. Fans signed petitions. Cosplayers stood outside courtrooms dressed as pirates, not for irony, but for loyalty. One girl cried, "I just want to see Captain Jack again." Johnny smiled. A real smile. Not a movie star grin, a human one. He answered not with contracts, but with gestures. Visiting children's hospitals dressed as Sparrow, appearing at charity events in character, reading bedtime stories as the pirate for sick kids who clung to him like a talisman. He didn't need Disney to be Jack Sparrow, because Jack did not belong to Disney anymore. He belonged to the people and to the man who created him. So what is Johnny Depp's legacy? Not box office records, not tabloid archives, not scandals or trials or gossip. His legacy is this: a man is not what is said about him, but what remains after the noise is gone. He teaches us that pain can refine, exile can purify, and the greatest revenge is peace. He teaches us that art is not performance, but survival. That a pirate can be a poet, that a clown can be a philosopher, that a shy man can become a myth and still long only for silence. He teaches us that fame is a paradox, a spotlight that blinds and a darkness that reveals. Johnny walked through both. He burned, he fell, he rose, like a phoenix with paint-stained hands. Imagine Somerset again. The rain against the glass, the gardens fading into fog. Inside, a man paints, slowly, quietly. Not a comeback, not a headline, just a life. Somewhere on a shelf sits a pirate hat, not retired, resting. The world still waits for him, but he is in no hurry. There is dignity in stillness. There is power in time. And perhaps one day he will walk on stage, turn toward the wind, and speak those familiar words. Captain Jack Sparrow, at your service. But until then, there is rain, there is peace, there is canvas, and there is legacy. Not as legend, but as lesson. Because Johnny Depp's story is not about scandal, nor fame, nor survival. It is about the simple, radical truth. You can lose the world and still find yourself.